is there a financial incentive that is underpinning this whole narrative to try
Alignment
and get
of incentives, financial incentives in particular, drive almost everything. Imagine having direct access to someone who's navigated life's toughest terrains and come out stronger. Someone who's been there, done that, and can guide you with empathy, experience, and honesty. This isn't just advice. It's a lifeline, a strategy session, a chance to learn from my journey so you can accelerate yours. Without the ability to be self-aware and introspective, the ability for you to get to where you want to go, nearly impossible. Welcome back to the David Guttman podcast. I'm actually in Scottsdale, Arizona, filming a bunch of podcasts, and I met Brady Edwards, who's the owner of the podcast studio. Where's this? Biggest agency.
That's right.
And I'm like, you know what? I'd be crazy for me to miss the opportunity to sit down and talk to you yourself, especially when I had heard that you'd worked for Mr. Beast for a couple of years, and obviously, we'll get into that a little bit.
Right.
But really appreciate you taking some time to sit down with me.
Absolutely. It's been so cool to watch your style. Like, this is a show you started several months ago, and you already are in the pocket on it. And some people have it, and some people don't, and they can learn it, but you have it. So it's been fun to listen to, and I was like, well, I'd love to be on the show.
Well, I said this before, like, coming from you, that means the world to me. And I also appreciated, the constructive feedback too. It's like, it's a journey, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and I'm just trying to get a little bit better. My wife gives me a hard time because I probably rewatch every podcast before I push it out 3 times, and they're generally an hour long, right?
That's admirable.
It's a lot of time. It's just like, I want to get better. And, look, I'm trying to influence people's lives. I'm really trying to genuinely make an impact. And so I want to be careful about what I say and how I say it. And, I'm not going to re-record the whole thing, but if I can make some learnings from it and be better the next time, I want to do that.
It would shock you how many people I've worked with don't watch their shows back. And we watch them when we do an episode. We film it, we edit it, we QA it, make sure there's nothing questionable. But it's a lot more people than you'd expect don't do what you're doing. You got to go back to the game tape and understand, how am I delivering? How's my intonation? Because right now I'm in the pocket, I'm doing it. But in retrospect, if I'm not learning from the last episode I just did, how are you going to get better? And so that is podcasting is going to change the whole world in the next 3 years. We know that because the most recent case study is podcasting influenced the outcome of the election.
For sure.
If you look at Obama in 2008, he was able to leverage social media. Wow, change. It was a big deal. In 2016, Trump was able to do the same thing. This election cycle, Trump went on north of 30 podcasts.
Was it that many?
I'm
Wow.
ballparking. I'm pretty sure it
Yeah,
was.
I probably saw at least half a dozen. So
Right?
yeah.
And the moments got clipped and seen tens of billions of times. So we now see this emergent format that swung the outcome of an election at arguably the most perilous time in our country's history. And now the grown-ups are back in charge. And it's like podcasting had a real role in that. And so did Barron Trump. He talked him into it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because what I love about watching, say, someone on Joe Rogan, and the thing that drives me crazy about the regular news cycle is they can just run out the clock when it's a 5-minute segment or whatever. Like, they could just say up is down, black is white, doesn't matter. And even if the journalists, which they usually aren't, push back, they just keep lying until they run out of time.
Right.
But when you're on Joe Rogan for 3 hours, that's not an option. Like, he'll just keep asking the question until you cry uncle. And, and he did it with Trump, to be fair. Like, Trump wouldn't quite answer the question until Rogan would ask it the 3rd time, but then he would answer the question.
And he's had some crazy guests. During the height of the COVID pandemic, there was, I think, a vaccine expert, and he came on and he was like, yeah, like, what do you recommend other than getting the shot? And he's like, that's pretty much it. And the guy's overweight. He doesn't work out. And he's like candidly joking at a different part in the show. He's like, yeah, I'm eating fast food 2-3 times a day. He's like, I try and work out or whatever. And he's like, hold on a second. Right? So now Joe Rogan's got him in a headlock, right? And he's going, well, all of these other things are going to help your metabolic state. It's going to help you fight off the infection if you get it. Would you encourage people to do that? No, just just get the pharmacology, just get the shot. And you're like, it's just madness. And when it's all laid to bear like that, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And so this format is incredible because if I am a talking head and I cut it up over 5-10 minutes, I could probably obfuscate my real intentions or who I am as a person. But if I'm sitting there and I have an hour long, or in his case, 3 hours long, it's kind of hard to to hide who you are, your intentions.
Yeah.
Like ultimately, with a good interviewer, which I really think you are, you're going to get something that normally they're not probably prepared to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. But there it is.
Well, and the thing about it too is like my whole approach is like I have no interest in whatever and having some kind of gotcha thing and get someone to embarrass anyone or anything like that. I mean, I guess I'd love something to go viral because people found it useful, but that would be the only reason, and I go the other way. I did it on one of the podcasts that I did yesterday where the guy got a little emotional. I'm like, how can I sort of drive the conversation in a way to help him, give him the room he needs to be able to, get back in control and stuff like that. Like I want people to look good. I want them to be the best version of themselves because that's what I want to give to the people that are listening.
I love that. Shout out Josh, by the way. Josh was super
He was
cool.
Fantastic. Yeah, he was really, and that's the other thing too. Like, and again, so the TED Talk, this TED Talk that I'm working on, writing. Did I mention? I can't remember. Yeah. So one of my goals for 2025 is I want to do a TED Talk.
Nice.
So, and I'm going to use I'm using my cancer misdiagnosis as the hook.
Such a good
story. But the punchline is that what it taught me when I was 24, thankfully instead of 84, was that the path to happiness and purpose for me was service to others. Wow. And so whatever. So that's one of my goals for 2025. But in doing it, the reason I got so interested in TED Talks was my all-time favorite TED Talk is the Brené Brown one about vulnerability being a superpower, and that's the only way that you can have real human connection is you have to have vulnerability, which gives you authenticity, and without authenticity, you can't have human connection. Wow. And it's like what we were talking about before about dating, about how most people date, how ridiculously stupid it is. It's like, let me hide from you for as long as humanly possible who I am. Let me instead project what I think you want in a guy. And then when you fall in love with that person who looks nothing like me, then you're going to be disappointed, and vice versa. And that is unfortunately, and so this is the complete opposite of authenticity. And to me, I just think that that's the biggest problem. I think it's a problem in all relationships, in friendships, even in family relationships, certainly in romantic relationships, but even in business relationships.
Right.
And it's just a shame that because it's I think largely because I had that aha moment when I was 24, I have lived my life as a very authentic person. I don't know. I wasn't inauthentic before. I kind of didn't even really think about it. But since then I did, and it's a much happier way to travel through life.
I would imagine so. Yeah, that dating thing, there was a study they did where the average relationship, if people are operating inauthentically, it almost always ends at 4 months.
Huh.
Because at 4 months, you can't really hide who you are at that point.
Right.
4 months, you've spent 120 days with this person off and on, and they're going to more or less have a good sense of who you actually are versus the way that you were kind of showing up prior. And you made this interesting point off camera where it's like, it's also backwards. Like there's no purpose in doing that. Don't you want a better filter? Don't you want to know within 5 minutes if this person's a good fit or not? Why would you waste your time with somebody? Oh, because they have these characteristics. Okay, but if you're not a fit, then you're not a fit. And if you wait till 4 months to figure that out and it goes catastrophic, you're likely going to bring those same patterns into the next relationship. Whatever it is you're not resolving, the shadow work you haven't done or the mirror you're refusing to look into, that is not going to go away until you figure your stuff out. And then, hearing you in your different episodes this last couple of days and the way that you and your wife have been able to be so real. And I think it was you that said the things that I've never been able to talk about with anybody, we just air them out. We talk about them all the time. And that is the characteristic in my relationship now that has made all the difference is like you can allow yourself to be seen. You can also there's no point in hiding anything. Because if you're in a relationship where you probably feel compelled to do that, I don't find that to be sustainable at all.
Well, not only that, but it's like, how can you possibly feel satisfied in a relationship where you're not yourself?
Yeah.
It doesn't even make sense when you think about it.
It's performative.
It's exactly. It's a shame. And again, I think it comes back to, so there's this female influencer who I see on X all the time, and very attractive, kind of Middle Eastern looking, I think. I can't remember her name. But she says this thing about men need to understand that you can only, if you choose to be with someone who is not really physically attracted to you, you're an idiot. And that doesn't mean you can't be with a woman who's much more attractive than you are. Like, my wife is substantially more attractive than I am, okay? But I have zero doubt how attracted she is to me. And you can just, and this influencer is saying the same thing, which is, you can tell by how physically affectionate they are. And it's not just even about sex, wanting to snuggle, wanting to hold your hand, touching your face. I've been together with my wife now for 9 years.
Wow.
Like, you can't fake it for that long.
Right. At some point, you're going to go, oh, you don't want to do that anymore? What is that? Is there, or you do, because you like the person. Yeah.
And
amazing.
so, but it's so interesting that people don't take that approach. Well, I did want to make sure that because part of what I wanted to talk to you about was, having, worked with Mr. Beast and people on his team at a very high level for a couple of years, a little bit more.
Yeah, about 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, that's an experience that's, I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but game changing. And so I'd love to know kind of, some of the biggest lessons learned that maybe you could share with people who are doing some of the stuff that I'm doing podcasting, and talking about kind of maybe the more nuanced things that people don't think about that make a big difference.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And every one of us are going to see exactly what I'm about to say. They're going to go, oh, I know exactly what you mean. I saw it this morning. When we wake up, one of the first things people do, and they shouldn't, but they do, is they open their phone and compulsively go to Instagram or TikTok or something else. So within 10 minutes, you're back into the scroll. And the videos that actually stick with you have been plotted out and planned in some way to where the very first thing that you're seeing is a hook. And now people are getting a lot more, I would say, the vocabulary of what makes a good story or a good piece of content. I think more people are figuring it out, which is really cool to see, because I don't want subpar content served to me ever.
Right.
And so the first thing that you'll notice is a video that doesn't get your attention and ultimately you don't watch all the way through is a video that was poorly planned. And the first moment of it, oh, dude, but if you just get to like 30 seconds, you're going to see, like, I really had this. It doesn't matter. I'm not starting the video there.
Yeah.
It's the first thing. And so when we would plan a video, typically, and Jimmy's talked about this ad nauseum in podcasts, is he would start with the title and the thumbnail. So I'll give you an example. It was one I'll take a little bit of credit for, but they took it even further than I'd imagined. I told Jimmy one day, I was like, dude, what if we rented a cruise ship? And I was like, picture like the thumbnail, right? It's you in front of a cruise ship. I got this cruise ship for all of my friends. And he loved it. What they ended up doing with it was they're going to go from $1 boat to $1 billion boat, right? And so there's
Jeff
this
Bezos' boat.
Yeah, exactly. I think they did towards his yacht. It was insane. And so the planning that goes into that, then, okay, great. We have the title and the thumbnail. They have a team of people that look into the aspect of the video and go, okay, let's say it went this route. Is all of that physically possible? They have a feasibility team, because that's the nature of the channel. Is like when you're butted up against the reality of things.
Let me stop your set. How many people in total are on his team, like that are working on content creation?
Hundreds. I ran a team at one point. My team was about 16 people. And so it was, because some videos we would have, a great example is I hired a bounty hunter to catch me. If the bounty hunter catches me, he wins. It was like $100,000. Right. And I got this like Lightning McQueen backpack from a Ross down the road, and we stuffed the money in it, and now it became this like motif. But with that, we're leapfrogging from destination to destination. We have all these locations pre-planned. And so the logistics of that are, okay, let's say it's an A to B to C route, and the bounty hunter is trying to catch Jimmy, and Jimmy's got to run away. And so we have all of these escape vehicles and decoys. But what happens is I've got the bounty hunter's perspective. And so I need a camera team staying on top of him and his perspective. And then I need a receiving team at the location he's about to get to. So that's two teams there. Now I have Jimmy running away, and Jimmy needs somebody that's going with him. It was usually Tariq, another camera director. And then we have the location that Jimmy's getting to. So now you have 4 teams that have the cameras they themselves are operating, but then each of these locations, on the off chance that we miss something, because those moments are all raw, like they're not scripted. And so you have to plan for all kinds of contingencies, B timelines opening up, C timelines. So you have to have cameras there stationary, making sure that they're catching anything that the main camera operators might miss.
Wow.
But those systems all need to have redundancies in place, and we don't know what time they're going to show up. And so you have to have those cameras able to run all day. But most of the cameras don't do that. They shut off after 2 hours of runtime, or their cards fill up. And so you have to have teams in place to manage the stationary cameras. So you start factoring in all of the different, like you throw a stone in a pond, ripples go. If you throw 5 in, you can't account for all of the different outcomes. But that's the goal, is to try and cover as much ground.
I'm exhausted just listening to it.
That was the worst video of my life. I mean, it was incredible. You know, I think it has 200 million views, and that was the flagship video. And then after I left, I hired an FBI agent to hunt me. I hired special forces to hunt me, an assassin to hunt me. And so they'll come up with these concepts. So when you start from the title and the thumbnail, you are putting yourself in the shoes of the cold viewer. And so if you take the David Guttman podcast, what is the first thing that they're going to encounter? Because they don't know you. You know, people know you from the private sector, but like you as a public figure in this capacity, they don't know what it is exactly you have to offer. So then what are you, if they get that video served to them, recommended to them, big win. YouTube is now telling you and them, there's something about that user's metadata that I know that they're interested in this. You know, they watch Mr. Beast videos, right? And so YouTube is going to go, here's a guy that actually worked there. This person's a super fan. And so they're going to probably recommend the video, this interview. And there's a high chance that that person clicks on it. But it's not great. You know why? Because underneath that is a cooking video, and that person's learning how to cook. Or they love Minecraft, and YouTube goes, this is how YouTube thinks. If they watch the Minecraft video, I will keep them on the platform for probably another 2 hours. If I give them the David Guttman episode, I could probably get them from end to end for the length of the episode, because I've been able to test and see that David does a great interview, and most people that watch it, they actually give me absolute watch time. So David's doing something right. So the platforms are incentivized. You have to understand what the platforms want, rather. You need to be incentivized to give them what they want, which is keep them on the platform as long as possible by having amazing content, jumping right into the meat and potatoes of it. And then in the first frame, the first moment, fulfill on what the title and the thumbnail is. So it's like, in the big picture of commentary around YouTube, this is all pretty obvious stuff. I think when you really like the strategists, they're all going to kind of say this, but because so many people parrot it, it kind of does get overlooked, or it's like, yeah, it's one of 10 things. Dude, it is the very first thing that people ever see of your videos. It is exactly the thing that will either make them decide that they're clicking on it or they won't.
Right.
And so if you think title, thumbnail, and then go into the content, as in a podcast format, it's hard because the podcast gets shot first. And so you're now trying to, after the fact, repackage or repurpose whatever the conversation was. But for the most part, it's like, okay, well, what is the most interesting parts of this conversation, and what are people going to resonate with the most? What's going to keep watch time going and keep the viewer glued, especially if they get served an ad? So that's from a high level, all YouTube, not counting all the niches, podcasting versus cooking, instructional, edutainment. That's the best principle I can ever give, and I say it to our clients, is think about the experience of the cold viewer. They don't know you. They don't care about your bank account. They don't care about the success of your channel. They're there to consume, which sounds like a little like weird, right? Saying it like that, but they are there to watch a video. And all YouTube cares about is, are you helping me achieve that goal of keeping them here? Or are you not helping me? In which case I probably won't be recommending your content. Jimmy says this all the time. He's like, look, if your videos aren't performing, the algorithm has nothing against you. You just don't understand what people want. And so therefore, you know, it's not going to recommend you.
Yeah.
There was this guy, Ryan Trahan. I'll end with this, and then I'd love to hear what you got to say. Ryan Trahan did this video where he started in California with a penny. And he started the video with, I've got this penny. I think I'm kind of paraphrasing. I've got this penny, and for the next, call it 30 days, I'm going to make my way across the United States using only this penny. And so he would go up to complete strangers and trade up the penny. And there was some novelty to it because there's a camera crew following him or whatever. But the channel had just started. And he was able to take the penny and trade up to like a pack of gum or something, and trade up to where now he's able to buy a hotel, or he had to sleep on the side of the road. And he was able to grit this out, landed all the way into North Carolina, which is where Mr. Beast's operation is. And 30 days later, or whatever it was, he dropped a video every single day. And the finale was there, and Mr. Beast greeted him, and oh my gosh, you did it. And that channel got like 6 million subscribers in less than a month.
Wow.
Because would you want to walk across the country like
with a penny?
Yeah. No.
That's a tough call.
It's a grit. You know, it's gritty, it's hooky. And then as like 10 videos in, he would publish the day before every single day. People are starting to share. They're like, dude, this dude is doing this right now.
Right.
You know, and so there was some real excitement about it. And so
That was clever.
It's it's a master's class in how to, and I think he got a Netflix show from it. Yeah, Netflix or Amazon Prime. So the reason I say that is you can do it. You could come up with a plan to make an absolutely viral video. The question is are you willing to do what that takes? And so in this case, like we're super bullish on podcasts because it swayed an election. You see where the money is moving. Spotify invested another $250 million into Joe Rogan. They're investing in all kinds of creators, and ad dollars are flowing into sponsorship deals. Right. So this is early days right now. Like think YouTube 2012. And what was that like? Well, everybody thought, well, you know, YouTube's kind of done. There's all these channels that figured it out. And so there's no point in starting a YouTube channel. And people say this every year, but in 2012, they said it then. Well, what if you had started a channel? That's when Mr. Beast started his. It was in 2012. Right. When everybody said, oh, there's already too many YouTube channels. Right. We hit saturation point. And it's like, absolutely not. And so in the same way that if you had started one then and gridded it out, figured out what people like, what they didn't, committed to making 100 bad videos and bang your head against the wall for a while, who knows where your channel could be today. So we feel strongly that podcasting as a format had a few early pioneers, some people that really gritted it out and stress tested the concept to show that there is intrinsic value. And now it's early days. So.
Let me ask you this, because one of the things I will admit wholeheartedly that I struggle with, and I remember when I was, prior to being president of Investify, the company I'm at now, I was CEO of a prop trading firm called Top Tier Trader. And most of the firms are being run by 20, 25-year-old kids.
Really?
Yeah. And some of these businesses are doing $5, $10, $15 million a month in revenue.
Dang.
Right? And they didn't know what the hell they were doing. and like literally, some of these guys, like they would do the most jackass things, like take their shirt off and run on the football field, at the Super Bowl as a way to get attention, right? And guy got arrested and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of clicks. and my whole thing now in the trading space, I believe the approach I took was the right one, which is, look, they need to trust that when they actually are in profit, we're going to pay them out. That's why a lot of these firms went under. Something like 150 of the firms in our industry went under in like a 9-month period of time, something crazy, because they were playing shenanigans with the payouts and they were ripping off their customers. And so
FTX.
When all that's happening, people have to feel we're super trusted. And that's why I started getting in front of the camera. I was the only person above the age of 15, running one of these firms. And so, hey, let's make hay with that and say, here's a guy you can trust. Here's a guy who's, seems like he's honest and knows what the hell he's talking about. And I was unwilling to do any of the stuff that was just like attention grabbing. I'm generally, and I would say the same thing with my podcast, largely because I'm not doing it to make money. I'm doing it because I'm trying to actually, give back. And I feel the same way, which is I'm not willing to do stupid shit just to be able to get eyeballs. But then there's part of me that's like, well, but if doing some stupid shit allowed you to help more people, should you do it? And I guess what's your thoughts about that? Can you do it and not be a jackass?
Okay, this is fun. I just spoke at Silicon Slopes last week. I told you about that. And a similar question was asked. And it was fun to tell people that there are no rules anymore and to watch half of the room's faces just fall. Because they're tech entrepreneurs or they're CFOs. I get people that we prospect a lot. So we have people come to us and say, hey, I want to talk with, look at starting a show with you guys. I go, great. What's your background? And they will be in finance. They will be in, accounting or something else. I'm like, not a sexy topic. There is a way to do it though. But they are hell-bent on this not becoming a cost center. They're like, if I'm going to do it, it has to be monetizable right away. It has to pay for itself. And I'm like, well, this is probably not a good fit for you then. Because up front, if you're going to do it right, aside from filming on like an iPhone, which you could do actually, and filming on your MacBook, there's not going to be an evergreen quality level to your show. Therefore, it's probably not going to stand the test of time. You're going to have to invest up front to make a show worthwhile. And that's just the production side of it. Then there's the back end side of it. So when you can bridge the gap of going, I realize that this is not going to be a money printer right away, and you can make peace with that, that's really step one. And people that are, I would say, a little bit more left-brained, they're focusing on the P&Ls, and that's all they worry about. You're like, well, this is art, and art is kind of this dead horse beaten all the time, but it is art. This is a format, and if you're going in with the purpose of this has to be monetizable, you've lost the script before you even started.
Interesting.
So to answer your question, when I was asked this, I gave them an example of the first one that most people have heard of is the Wendy's Twitter account. So Wendy's handed over the reins to an unhinged millennial a number of years ago. And they started picking fights with McDonald's on Twitter and just dunking on like their food. They started making fun of people in the comments on viral tweets, and they started just raising hell. And people are like, oh my gosh, you're a Fortune 500 company. Consider the optics. What are you doing? It was brilliant. It went viral. Everybody started talking about the Wendy's Twitter. Who was it running it? And just waiting for them to say something out of pocket because it was so funny. Because it's like, what are the consequences? Do you think someone's now going to not go and buy a Wendy's sandwich?
Right.
No, but what it did is it went from, here are 5 fast food restaurants that I'm passing on the road. That's the one with the funny tweets.
Yeah.
And so that was a great case study. Another one more recently is TCL. That's the crappy TV that they sell at Walmart. Right. So you've got the Sonys and Toshibas or whatever. And then there's the cheapy freshman college dorm television, right? TCL. So when you're the cheapy television sold in the back of the Walmart, you really have nothing to lose. Someone apparently figured that out. They released this unhinged video of this narrator going, if you get this TV, you'll be rizzing up everyone in class. If you get this, you'll be so Sigma, and Skibbity Toilet plays best on our TVs. And it's all these transitions and, the term brain rot. I'm sure you've heard of that. So out of pocket, so inappropriate. And this is a very well done company, the global distribution. It crushed. Tens of millions of views. Wow. Comments in there going, this is so bad, I'm going to go buy one. And so when I tell people this, when I tell clients this, they don't know how to process it, because if you look at the landscape of legacy media, we're going to do a commercial. Okay, great. Marketing gets $200,000 for the production of this commercial. And we're going to have to go to a media buyer who's going to get us placement on a television program or a set of them. And we need to make sure that, PR is good and we follow the brand guidelines. All of these buttoned up rhetoric that has underpinned this whole thing for decades. All of it just got lit on fire in the last 6 years. And that's really hard to deal with, because I'm 33 now and I can look in the last 10 years having, a little bit of perspective and go, 10 years actually is not that long a time.
Right.
It flies by. And what's alarming is as I get older, it seems to fly faster.
It does. It absolutely does.
And so when, I look at someone that would be in your position, head of a company, and you'd be like, what do you mean every single rule that we have followed for the last 3 decades has been completely destroyed in the last 6 years? And that's really hard to cope with. But the bottom line is that there are no rules really anymore, and it might work. The more heretical, the more iconoclastic you can be, the higher probability you have of having it get in front of people, because it's so counterintuitive. We're in a counterintuitive landscape right now.
Interesting.
And so that gives people almost nothing to go off of other than whatever you think is right. There's a chance. But what if you were to do, I'll give you another example. There is this Scandinavian home builder. I don't remember the name of the company, but it's stunning homes, 5,000 square feet, premium models, really beautiful architecture. And so you're like, oh, this is a brand of dignity, of quality, of poise. That's not what they do. Their shorts, I go, that bitch Karen next door is never going to know what to do when your 20-foot archway slams into the side of your house. She's going to shit a brick when she sees your window panel garage doors rolling up. Fuck all of the Joneses. And you're like, what? Who approved this,
Right.
And if you think about the board meetings, enough people probably just short-circuited when they heard the pitch.
Right.
Right? Because they're like, we have to protect our brand. We can't be viewed in this way. Well, unfortunately for them, they were wrong. These videos all went viral because it's counterintuitive and it's heretical. And people they don't. So do you have to be a jackass in order to get your messaging kind of at the front and center? It would work. It would work.
Well, it's funny because, Monsi and her team, have been having me do reaction videos, which I'd never done before. And the ones they picked me to do were a bunch of them were political. I'm like, are you sure this is a good idea? And they're like, yep. I'm like, well, I hired you for a reason. So, okay. In fact, it's funny. I just recorded one last night. I don't know if Monsi's team's going to like it. So have you seen the clip with, oh God, what's the really pretty blonde journalist who used to be on Fox, and then Megyn Kelly. So Megyn Kelly does this clip where she's talking about Jeff Bezos' wife when she had her boobs out at the inauguration.
You got Zuckerberg.
And anyway, so the reaction video I did was Megyn Kelly being like, she goes, it's not the first time I said she dresses like a hooker. And it was hilarious. So I'm like, you know what? I might as well have some fun with it. And the reality is, if I'm going to be authentic, then I have to be authentic.
That's the key.
Yeah. And that's how I feel. Like, I think that's funny,
Yes. And that feels trivial. It's like, oh, be authentic. Like step into your true self. You're like, these are just these like dumb platitudes, like so trite, whatever. I'm showing up. I'm doing the thing.
Yeah.
If you can let people see you in a way, like going back to Josh's interview, he felt things because he's talking about his children, and he got emotionally, and he was able to he was seen in that moment.
Yeah.
Some people, even 10 years ago, be like, I need you to remove that.
Right.
Right. But also, what if someone saw that version of David Guttman? Because you're going to, I'm in my head. I've got, I'm on these boards, whatever. And people are like, oh my gosh, he's a human. It's like in a landscape where AI has had so much brute force influence in a very short period of time, the authenticity is going to become the commodity that everybody actually craves in every single video that they get. I made this point last week too. I've seen videos where people will leverage AI and it'll be like a guy standing in a room or something. And then boom, he cycles through, he's wearing a jacket, now he's wearing a t-shirt, now he's wearing, a blazer or whatever. And it'll be 100 outfits in like 5 seconds. So it's a fun editing trick, but that didn't move my emotional needle.
Yeah.
But if it was somebody talking like I was misdiagnosed with cancer at 24. Right. I was told I had 6 months to live, and 3 separate oncologists all told me this at 3 separate hospitals. I was doing all this, getting my affairs in order, and I had no idea that none of them had looked at the CT scan, and they were all wrong. If they had just done that. Now, what? That's so much cooler than an AI edit. There's a human in that story, and stories are how we've evolved as a species. So there is something in a good storyteller, there's something that they draw you in with, which is, I'm taking you on a journey. I'm confident in the destination. I'm going to hold your hand and take you to the spot. And I'm confident that the payoff will be worth it. See how confident I am. And so we've done that in cave drawings. We've done that in language, in cultural pass downs and themes and tropes, religious tropes, whatever it is. That is how we as a species communicate. And so our brains are hardwired for it. And if you're not doing that, you've lost the script.
Yeah, I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I guess I'm actually totally fine being a jackass so long as I'm an authentic jackass.
Cool.
And you know what it is, and it's kind of circles back to the conversation about dating and relationships, which is part of the reason I'm able to be authentic is I actually like myself. Like, I think I'm a decent guy, and therefore I don't have to pretend I'm someone different because I don't think who I am is bad. And I really do feel like if you don't love yourself, I don't know how you love anybody else. Not really. And even with my daughter, who's of the people on the planet that I care about their opinion the most, it is my daughter by miles. But even with her, I made a choice, I don't know how long ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, that I was always going to be fully authentic with her. I always give her, even when she was younger, I would give her the age-appropriate version of whatever it was.
Sure.
But and in the moment, in fact, I think I can't remember if I mentioned this to you. I recorded a podcast with her, which she has not yet authorized me to release to the public. I think I'll eventually get her there. But she's absolutely brutal with me. But the reality is, she genuinely respects the fact that I'm myself. And the fact that I'm open to being wrong. Because she's like, yeah, I used to think all this other crazy shit. Now you think this new crazy shit. But hey, at least you're always honest in yourself and authentic.
Well, she's probably seen you change your mind.
She has.
And that's huge, right? I think it was Adam I talked with today. I was like, when I've seen someone come into new information, how do they handle it? So we just had an election. We have a new president. And all of the values that he more or less represents, the voter base that said, what we think he's going to do reflects what I want to see in the country because we have X, Y, and Z problems. Those pieces of information, if that was presented to someone that didn't vote for the current administration, how would they receive that information? People talk to them, they're like, well, you don't understand our side of things. Yes, I do. because that's actually been the only narrative that has prevailed for the last 4 years.
Right.
So I do know your side of it because I can't go anywhere and not see it.
Right.
Mine has been the counter into, it's been so contrary that I was labeled all these crazy things. So I know your perspective on these things because it's on MSNBC, CNN, all of these places, you know, blasted everywhere you look. However, I also have done my research here, 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 and here. So when people are presented new information, if they're not willing to be flexible and rewire their neuroplasticity, it doesn't allow them to take something in and reconfigure, I don't trust that person as much. So your daughter trusts you because she has watched you change your mind on things when new information became present. And that's a superpower. And most people are just, they dig in their heels, they double down and plant their flag, because if you're in the landscape of I'm swimming around and I don't know what I thought I knew 5 minutes ago, it's really unsettling. And that's why people will, to the death, defend their views. If something they hold close is challenged, then their whole world falls apart, because then what? Then what? You're wrong? Dude, you've been wrong. You're wrong way more than you're right. There's so much information. Of course you're going to be wrong, but be okay taking that information in and recalibrating. This election, we saw a host of Democrats leave the Democratic Party vocally. As an example, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Tulsi Gabbard.
Joe Rogan voted for Bernie Sanders, a communist.
He's the most Democrat. And it's like, what happened? Can you look at that and ask what happened? Not like, oh, what are the views? Ivermectin. Dude, can you just be a grown up and go, why did they leave?
Right.
And if you're not looking at the playing field from the vantage point of someone that has scaled incredible companies, 8-9 figure exits, but you're doing a job and you're making, call it sub 100K. Not to say that that's the only measurement, but that's a decent one. Those are two different life paths, and you're going to be presented with very different information. When high caliber people are making decisions like this, Mark Andreessen, right? You've got Silicon Slope, titans and icons, even Zuckerberg, however you want to look at that. When they're all sitting there going, we have left and these things are not being run correctly. Be okay with adapting to new information. Your brain will thank you for it. Your neuroplasticity is going to stay alive. You're going to navigate life with more optimism. And I think that people that are so set in their ways, that scares the shit out of them.
Well, your point's totally right about it. And I had the same argument with my dad. He claims he's, independent and right down the middle. He's left of center. I'm sorry. And it's just because it's the media he's listening to, right? And I'm like, Dad, the difference is I know every argument on the left because I've heard them ad nauseum.
There you go.
The difference is you haven't even heard the argument unless you heard it from me, right? I say, because you're not, and look, what I try to explain to them is I said, look, to me, if it wasn't for Elon, we wouldn't have free speech because we wouldn't have Twitter. And if we didn't have Twitter, the other ones wouldn't have rolled over. Like Zuckerberg would have never rolled over if it wasn't for X.
That's right.
And, the reality is I'm like, they have community notes. I get to see both sides on both kinds of stories. So it's like if someone on the right posts something that's bullshit, people on the left community note it and vice versa. And so, and now Meta's going to copy that and they're going to do community notes.
How wild is that?
Yeah, I honestly, I have been pleasantly surprised. One, I thought there was definitely a non-zero chance that they were going to somehow get the Trump between the election and inauguration. Because what I was reading about was too, if they had killed him before January 6th, before the certification of the election, it's not even clear that J.D. Vance would have become president.
Really?
Yeah. Apparently, it was a very gray legal area because it had never happened before, right? And give the Democrats an inch, right?
Oh, that's right.
And so anyway, I was really worried about that. But not only was I thrilled to see that he actually made it all the way, if they assassinated him after January 6th, but before the 20th, Vance would have become president. That was very clear. But anyway, how the fact that he's gotten Pete Hegseth just got
that's right.
confirmed last night. I mean, if they can get Tulsi, Kash Patel, and an RFK across the finish line, those three are going to be game changers, especially Kash Patel. Because there are some people the thing that's just so infuriating, I think, for people that are paying attention is no one's ever held accountable, ever, for anything.
Fauci.
Yeah. I mean, it's infuriating, And so, because, again, if you're a fair-minded person, you don't like when things turn out unfair. And yeah, life's not fair, the world's not fair, but that doesn't mean we have to like it.
Why do you think that is?
Which part?
That people in certain positions are shielded from the repercussions of their actions. It's just been such a bizarre puppet show for the last 4 years. And I'm seeing on Twitter, it's like within 5 days, Trump has traveled all over the country. he has managed to sit down with the mayor of Los Angeles right after he went to North Carolina and ordered the Army Corps of Engineers to rebuild everything.
Right.
He did it with an EO. He swiped a pen and it happened. He has now sent 2,500 National Guard, Marines, Army to the border and immediately reinforced it, completely shut off access. So how is it that that wasn't done in the last 4 years? You know, I'm just like, I look at it, I'm baffled.
Well, the one honestly that always baffled me the most was the whole trans thing. We don't think a kid who's under 18 should be able to get a tattoo. How can you possibly argue that hormone blockers are a good idea? The reality is, an 18-year-old's not ready to make any good decisions. Your brain's not fully formed until you're 25.
Right.
Like, there's an argument that if we're going to move the age anywhere, it should be moved in the other direction. I actually think not being able to vote till you're 25 would probably be a pretty damn good idea.
That's an interesting thought. That one, I came across some pretty interesting information, which is what are the financial incentives of, let's call it the whole trans ideology.
Right.
Well, if you have someone at a young age that actually questions their own biological correctness or like their interstate, their gender identity, you have a client for life. Because
the lifetime revenue is crazy.
It's like, I don't know.
Millions.
Yeah.
It's millions of dollars that customer that you just created by having a trans kid is a lifetime value of that customer is in the millions of dollars.
And what do we learn from history? Let's look at the Sacklers.
Yeah.
That there are clear-cut examples of financial incentives completely superseding moral imperatives. And that's just true. It's like that. If those are things of the reality, and I'm not saying you must look at every single thing that way, but it would be irresponsible to not go, is there a financial incentive that is underpinning this whole narrative to try
Alignment
and get
of incentives, financial incentives in particular, drive almost everything. It's like the whole follow the money, like like most good cliches, there's a reason that they're good cliches.
Yes.
It's you follow the money and you're going to be able to figure out. I mean, it's funny, in business, it's always surprised me how many times I've been involved in a business that wanted to cap how much their salespeople made.
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, you do realize as soon as they stop making commissions, they will no longer sell anything, right? Like, you do understand that. Like, well, but they're making more than the CEO. They're adding more value than the CEO. That's why they're making more than the CEO.
Are we not growing?
And by the way, they don't have the equity that the CEO has. And so it's, but it's very common, or they'll find ways. I mean, telemedicine company that I ran for 5 years, my top salesperson made as much as the other 5 sales reps combined, and she was making 3 times what anyone else was making, and deserved every penny. After I left, after I was fired, they've done everything they possibly can to screw her out of as much commission as they possibly can. And they don't realize the part that's so funny about the whole thing is they think they're clever. They think they save money. What they don't realize was they've cost themselves millions of dollars of revenue. I know this because I talked to her myself. And she's like, this is the business I could have closed that I didn't. Okay. And the millions of dollars in revenue, because of the valuation of the business, multiplied times 10. So them saving, $100,000 in commissions probably cost them $3 million in revenue and $30 million in value.
Is that cutting
and
off?
They think they're smart. That's the part that's crazy.
Cutting off their nose despite their
Yes.
face, right?
And the number of businesses that do that drive me crazy. In fact, the part of the thing I think I'm best at in business, I'm really good at business models. And like when I went to the telemedicine company, we were selling. What telemedicine is? Basically,
yeah, absolutely.
It's great. Especially if you need a prescription for an antibiotic or something. You have bronchitis or something like that.
It really boomed post-COVID, like in the COVID era. Like
Absolutely.
up into the right.
Absolutely. And so, Teladoc was the 800-pound gorilla in our space. They had 90% market share. They were publicly traded. They were the only publicly traded company in our space. We had like 0.01% of the of the market share. And over the next 5 years, we won 100% of our customers from Teladoc, and we charged 10 times as much.
Really?
And I got 0 pushback on the price because of our business model. So Teladoc's business model was, we want people to call as infrequently as possible so that our costs are as low as possible. And so we will throw up every hurdle humanly possible so that people will not call us, or if they do call us, they'll get frustrated and they'll never talk to a doctor. because then we don't have to pay the doctor for the call. We took what I said was, okay, yes, we're going to charge 10 times as much. Teladoc, so that in the telemedicine business, the term is called utilization. So if you have a 100-employee company and you have 10% utilization, that means 10 employees called in a 1-year period of time. So industry average for Teladoc was under 1% utilization. We had 55% utilization.
Whoa.
So it wasn't like 2 times better or 5 times better or even 10 times better. It was 50 times better. And we were charging 10 times the price. So we're an 80% discount.
Wow.
Right? So what I basically went to, and the other thing was, you don't sell benefits like telemedicine directly to the employer, to the actual person that has the employee. You sell it through a benefit consultant. So I'm like, we need to do something that makes the benefit consultant look good. So what we're going to do is we will contractually guarantee that for every dollar they pay us, we will generate at least $1.25 in saved costs because they didn't go to the ER or urgent care or primary care physician or whatever it is. Hard dollar savings, not some bullshit soft calculation. And if we don't, we'll refund all the way back to $0. So if we generate 0 phone calls, you will pay us 0. Okay? You'll only pay for the value we created. So imagine a slot machine where every dollar you put in the top, $1.25 comes out the bottom. And I'm like, by the way, that's the worst you can do. Our average customer gets 175%. They're getting 75 cents back on every dollar they invest. So now we go to the benefit consultant and we say, look, you got nothing but bad news. Every time you meet with your client, it's bad news. Rates went up, benefits went down. I'm going to guarantee your customer a positive ROI in the contract. And now all of a sudden the benefit consultants, because they got nothing but bad news, they're excited to bring some good news to the table. So change the entire, we went from 6 months away from bankruptcy to the Inc. 500 2 years in a row.
Jeez.
So, but again, it's about alignment of incentives.
Yeah.
Right? And the other thing too was, it's such a benefit to not know jack shit about an industry.
Huh.
Okay? Because when I started, I was like, why are we selling directly to why are we selling, why don't we sell through the benefit consultant? Why are we selling direct to the employer? And like, oh, we don't have enough, traction, and we don't have enough customers and stuff like that. I was like, well, just because we did it that way, it doesn't mean we should keep doing it that way. So when you come into an industry and you don't have any experience, you'd be surprised, and I'm sure it's true in your industry too. Well, that's the way it's always been done.
Yeah, that's the way it's always been done.
I remember you telling me the story that the cameras used to be $100,000 that people had to have. And then all of a sudden, well, hey, you can get something that's 80% as good for 1/20th of the price.
Yep.
Well, now all of a sudden you got a business. And so, well, that's not how it's been done. But hey, maybe how it's done is stupid.
Oh, my mind is blown. That's so true, though, because in the filmmaking industry is a great example. The only way to make a commercial or to make a movie was to have these insane sets. And 3 people's job is to operate the camera, and 3 people's job was to run the sound, and 8 people are dedicated to run the power cables and position the lights. And half the time, it's just because they're all they're waiting for the next job or the next movie. And so when one guy gets a job, they usually reach out to their buddies. They go, hey, I've got this guy, I'm trying to get all my friends work because they got a big budget. And so if that's been done that way in a legacy sense for decades, to then go, one guy can buy a Sony camera for $3,000 and take out a loan and get a $2,000 lens and a $5,000 laptop. And now that person can just produce commercials. He can film it, he can storyboard it, he can edit it and get it to the client. That was never a thing until really 2016.
Wow. And
up until that point, the barrier for entry was prohibitive. It was super cost prohibitive. You had to be a film studio, you had to be a production house. And then you would get access to, a $150,000 camera. They have lenses that are literally $800,000.
What?
Easily.
Like an IMAX thing or something? Or?
Just the lens, just the nature of the glass, the quality of the glass. Because there's light passing through, and if that glass isn't very good, the glass itself is going to inhibit the way that the sensor is making sense of what it's looking at. So if it's crappy, there's a $200 lens, and then there's a $500,000 lens, and they're treated very differently. It's a whole science, but photons and how the light. And so when you think that that's the only way to do it, you're going to be stuck, or you're going to have to start this low-rung job and move to LA and wait tables, and hopefully I get into the film industry. And then a bunch of us were just scrappy. I picked up my first camera in 2017.
Really? That recent?
I was obsessed with YouTube. I grew up as a child actor, and so I was on Disney Channel, I was on Nickelodeon, and I saw the big production sets. And I was like, this must be necessary, right? All these people running around, these sound stages, it must be necessary. And then as time went on, and I realized that technology was changing, and now they're packing all of this stuff into these like pretty cost-effective cameras. I went on a whim and I got one because I was obsessed with YouTube. I was like, oh, this is fun. That's what they're doing. Like they're getting these $2,000-$3,000 cameras. They're filming their lives. It's not incredibly cinematic. It's not filmed on a dolly, and there's no amazing sound, but there's a story there, and I'm living vicariously through that person. And that became this whole emergent industry to where now it's content creators. That was something that you would be snide about 5-6 years ago. An influencer, people would absolutely not take that seriously 5-6 years ago. And now it is so prevalent, it is so dominant that Fortune 500 companies are all having to rekey their strategy. Every single company knows at this point that if they're not, it's like how the internet's a fad. We're in the yellow pages.
Yellow pages.
You know, like that's the proportionate equivalent. Is like if you're not doing this, you're going to go the way of Macy's.
I'm surprised you even know what a yellow page is.
Come on, I was born in the 90s, 91, you know. But then if Sears had, let's give an example with Sears. Let's say that they were so self-aware that they went, hey, we're the dying department store. And so we're just going to create a show in-house. And Sears, they had enough money sloshing around, you know, in the coffers. They could have put a little bit of spend behind it. And they go, here's a day in the life at Sears. And they had someone script it out, right? They would no longer be a nameless, faceless brand. Right. They actually could have potentially, I'm not saying this is guaranteed, but you have no emotional connection to Sears beyond the Sears catalog of like the 50s and the 60s or whatever. That nostalgia is gone. And you're in an era where everybody's consuming. So it's like, what would you do if you want to mitigate the downfall of your empire? If JCPenney's created some sort of in-house show or in-house content that was self-aware, it was meta, and they were just like, yeah, like we're the dying department store or something. Life in the day of a dying department store. There's a chance that they could turn this around. And they're going, well, you don't understand the decades of being able to acquire this much real estate, this much inventory, the logistics, the supply chains. You're like, I totally get it. This is like the Achilles heel though.
Right.
This has turned into a legitimate Achilles heel for all of these titans of industry. And the best ones are getting ahead of it. And they're going, where is the wind blowing? Skate to where the puck is going. And the puck is bouncing around everywhere. It's a friggin' air hockey table. But it is moving in a direction that it has not moved before. So like I told you off camera, I'm really impressed that you're seeing this too. That's why you're starting a show. In the next 3 years, so many solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, they're going to be furious at themselves for not starting their podcast today. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
Right.
And, you know, there's certainly now enough case studies where, oh, dang, I wish I'd started a podcast in 2016. Well, that's all well and good, but you've felt it today. You've filmed 5 episodes, 2 yesterday.
Yep.
I've had clients, they'll do batches of 10 or 12. They're pretty friggin' tired by the time that that's done. And if you do that day in, day out for 6-8 years relentlessly, it is impossible to describe beyond an anecdote what that's like. So before Mr. Beast, I worked on a channel, the kid's name was Tanner Fox. So Gen Zs, they all know him. My producer here, he knows him. That's how we got in touch. We would make a video every other day. And it's like, dang, that's a lot of videos. It's 100 videos plus in a year. And I would film them and I would edit them. And to try and convey what that takes to creatively come up with a new theme every other day, right, and then to go and make the video in post-production and then to deploy it and to stay on that grind, never miss a posting window.
Right.
It is unfathomable how much work that is to do. And if you're going to produce a podcast, if you're not doing it at least once a week, you're missing the mark, you know, because those platforms, they want to feel dated. They want you to show up with chocolate and flowers. Yeah. And they want to know that you're not just going to be a fly by night. Yeah. Like, hey, I'm going to try and send some of my viewers to your show. Are you in this for real? Because if you're in this for real, I'll cut you in on the money. I'll turn on AdSense. I will push people to your videos. But if you pop up, everybody gets excited and subscribes and you leave because lo and behold, it's hard to maintain a posting schedule.
Yeah.
Then I have no incentive because I want to keep people on YouTube a year from now. And the best way to do that is to get them on a journey. So if I feel like you started the journey and you dipped 2 weeks in, I don't trust you. I'm not going to send views your way.
Yeah.
So the longevity is probably the most important thing to consider when you're going to get into the space, because everybody needs to, but be prepared for a lot of work.
So I turn 59 in April. So
no kidding.
What I've basically committed to myself is I'm going to do 1 podcast a week, 1 Coffee with Podge episode a week until my 60th birthday. unless I get hit by a truck. That's the only way that doesn't happen. And then I'll see and I'll reassess. But, you know, and I'm going to talk to smart people like you and Monsi and people that are going to help guide me make the right decisions. Because I think one, I way underestimated how much I'd enjoy doing it.
Nice.
And second, how much I'm learning from the product. Like, the thing that's amazing to me is I'm trying to help other people and mentor other people. I'm getting mentored in the process.
You can't help but learn.
You can't help but learn from the things I'm saying myself, but from every single person I'm interviewing.
Wow.
There's at least, half a dozen, insights I gained from every podcast all 7 podcasts I did, including this one. And it's like, man, what's that worth? And if I'm going to do, over the next, 2 years, 100 of these at least, and let's say I got 5 each, that's 500 insights. What's that worth?
That's a great point.
So I totally underestimated that. And just the networking aspect of it. And, and the reality is, if you can do a good job, prepare properly, make the other people enjoy the experience too, you're building these relationships with people.
Yes.
And those, too, are going to be invaluable.
You're building an audience, and I made a point earlier about how people will come to us and say, well, how do I monetize this right away? And the answer I have is, this is not the way to do it. So Mr. Beast deploys a handful of products that they did after they blew the channel up. The first one was, there's been a spectrum of them, merchandise, t-shirts, those generate revenue. But one of the big ones that we first did, and I was there for, was Mr. Beast Burger. So at the height of COVID, we figured out the ghost kitchen model. We worked with somebody, and the ghost kitchen model kept 90% of our like DoorDash orders for Mr. Beast Burger were fulfilled by mom and pop restaurants that had to shutter their doors because of COVID. So they were actually able to not have people in their dining area, but they were just fulfilling Mr. Beast Burger DoorDash orders. And it kept all of like tens of thousands of restaurants, probably not tens of thousands of orders easily, but like a lot of restaurants were able to keep open during COVID and keep revenues coming because they were able to do this. And the way that they marketed it a little bit, but the reason it worked is they already had an audience. Right. So your sales team and your marketing department, those are there because you have to convince someone to make the purchasing decision. The inverse of that now is, if you already have an audience that you've been entertaining for a while, you've built trust because they've heard you uninterrupted for hours on hours on hours. Like, if you would trust Joe Rogan, you've heard him talk for 100 hours at least, and because you've seen him so unfiltered, you're just like, I would implicitly trust that person. Yeah. And you're letting people do the same thing for you. And Mr. Beast did the same thing by saying, I have made 1,000 videos. People know me inside and out. And so when I put my name on a product, it's going to be a good product. So the Beast Burger thing went nuts. The next one they did was Feastables. So the chocolate bar, right? Nationwide distribution, most grocery stores, every 7-Eleven, most gas stations. They did $600 million in revenue in 2023.
Oh my God.
It's a chocolate bar. And these are old industries, Hershey's, Mars. They're industries that people have tried. They've never been able to crack into and never gotten nationwide distribution. Beast did it. How did they do it? Because they didn't put the cart before the horse. They brought the value and the entertainment first. And then once the audience was there, they didn't need a sales team. Right. They brought a good product that stood the test. It stood the stress test of, does it hold our standard of quality the way our videos do? And then it went nuts. And so we're going to see, instead of trying to create a nameless, faceless box store or a nameless, faceless product or company, letting people see you first. And it's okay if you have a product, in market and circulation, but doing something totally parallel to it. And over time, if you figure out and you really care about the game, you're going to find a way to dovetail it into, now this is sales. So people will come, okay, we have a client who's a wealth manager, financial planning. His name's John Smallwood. His show is Money Isn't. And so he, every week, posts videos about, here's how you need to understand life insurance. Here are the tax changes that are coming up. Here's how you should plan for an early retirement. And it's like golden information. But the point is that people trust him now so much that they're getting on 15-minute calls. They go, I can literally have a phone call with a guy I watch on YouTube, and he can look at my portfolio and give me an assessment, and now I can become his client. So it's like, okay, yeah, YouTube isn't cutting you in on the ad revenue in a way that would totally offset what you're spending. Right. However, you can take all of that attention and those eyeballs and put them in somewhere else. You know, and that's another client, Spiritual Capitalist. They have he's developing an AI platform. It spits out SOPs, and it's got this whole dashboard, and it's beautiful. So people are coming to learn about spirituality. They're learning about capitalistic principles. But then he talks about, oh, by the way, I have the software, and people are buying up the software. And so it's like you can do these things and strategically make a plan for with the audience I've aggregated and the trust that I've received. This is where I'm going to steer that audience.
Well, think about it, right? It's because, I mean, if we've seen anything, and you got to give Trump full credit for this, which is we don't trust any institutions anymore. We don't trust any institutions, not the media,
WHO.
not our government, not the, the CDC, the WHO. We don't trust any of these people anymore, and which I think is a good thing. But so now, when what's true, you buy from people you trust. We don't trust corporations. We don't trust. So now it's like, I don't want to buy from Coca-Cola. I want to buy from you because I watch you, I listen to you, and I trust you, and I like you. You buy from people you like and people you trust, period. And they used to trust institutions, and they'd be okay buying from institutions. Now they don't anymore, and for good damn reason.
Seed oils and everything.
Yeah.
Microplastics.
Yeah.
These companies, the products are everywhere in the convenience, but they didn't do the due diligence. Where RFK has shown a light on that.
Yeah. Oh, honestly, like I actually read, I read his book, Dr. Fauci.
Did you really?
Oh my God.
Is it as horrifying?
It's way worse than you can think. Millions of people died because of AIDS because of Fauci, because he was trying to get the Nobel Prize for a vaccine to cure AIDS, and so kept some things off the market that would have saved millions of lives. I mean, it's crim. I mean, the fact that, it's just, don't even get me started.
They haven't been sued for the book, right? That's the point that I think
exactly.
Joe says.
He's not been sued
never
for
been
the
sued
book.
for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really heartbreaking. I mean, I have a good friend back in Miami, 45-year-old guy, perfectly healthy, no comorbidities, nothing. Vaccine injury, almost died of a heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, really close to dying. So
the near parallel with this, we just rewatched. You ever see Game of Thrones?
Oh yeah.
So we just watched it through again, and it was striking to me how many parallels I found in modern society. Fauci is an example. When Cersei Lannister is in, the castle, King's Landing, and she's looking down at all of the citizens in King's Landing, and she has this animosity, this disgust, because they're these plebeians, they're these gross people, and they have no care whether or not the place, gets blown up or attacked by dragons, whatever it is. And I'm like, it's a fiction, but I would wager to guess that at the highest level, when you are dealing with trillions of dollars in budget, and the population size isn't my company of 10 people or my company of 500 people who I'm going to encounter, I'm taking care of their families, but it's the population of the United States and maybe even a global numbers that are unfathomable to correctly assess. If that's the case, you're going to, over time, probably be desensitized to the numbers. You're going to be desensitized to the actual individual person and the suffering. You're going to deploy sweeping policies, considerations, legislation, stand 6 feet apart, wear these stupid masks. They're going to not be backed in science, but you know what? I am the science. Right. And you're going to do whatever it is you want with complete indifference to the actual people, because you don't look at them like people.
Yeah.
And so I think that was so laid to bear in the last 5 years, that this change of roles, like cleaning out the house and getting people in that actually still see people as people, is probably going to be one of the most paramount things in us turning this ship around and missing the iceberg, because I feel like we almost hit the iceberg.
Dude, we came very close. If this election went the other way, I literally went to the Nomad Capitalist event in Kuala Lumpur.
Wow.
Last year, because I'm like, if this election in November goes the wrong way, I'm going to need citizenship or residency in another country. I mean, I'm like straight up, for me, my daughter, and my wife.
Legitimately.
I mean, I went halfway across the world just for that reason. I'm so glad it turned out the way it did. But man, we were close.
Well, and this isn't like a celebrity going, if I'm going to leave the country, on some sort of like genuflecting moral high ground. I'm wrapping myself up in a narrative.
Jane Fonda, good riddance.
Yeah. Bye. Your point is like, it would be the fall of Rome.
Right.
It would be an uninhabitable place. The inmates would be running the asylum. Policies like cracking open the border and having 24 million people streaming in, some of them known terrorists, known mental asylum escapees, or, released from their prisons, just streaming in. And it's like, for what? What is the incentive? Making all of us feel less safe in our homes that we pay taxes on, that we work hard to build the economy, the greatest economy that's ever been. You know, if there's people at the top enacting policies and shelling out billions of dollars to all of these bizarre, you know, I don't want to say the wars. I mean, I understand it very well, but I don't know why they're doing it. If those are the people in charge, what is the point of even being here? And that's not, I'm not trying to make a virtue signal at that point. I'm saying I don't think it's safe. And that sounds like that's basically where you were at.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and you know, you see what was happening in Canada, you know, where they froze the bank accounts of people that donated money to the truckers.
Yeah.
Like, how is that not against the law?
Yeah, we're in crazy town.
And not only that, like, you know, I mean, all credit to Trump the other day with the president of Bank of America. Like, you guys aren't taking, what are you talking about?
We never debanked them.
Yeah, we of course we do. Yeah, what about the ones you didn't? What about the one, you know, and even stuff like, again, you could love or hate Andrew Tate. I actually think there's a decent amount of good in his message. It's just unfortunately clouded by a bunch of, you know, stupid shit. But the reality is the fact that like within 2 hours, you know, every one of his accounts was canceled. His Airbnb account, his Uber account, it was all coordinated.
Yes.
If that doesn't terrify you, you know, I don't know what would. You know, another good reason you don't want a central bank digital currency.
That's right.
Because that would be, oh my God.
They could just flip a lever if you're not politically aligned. You know, we have a credit score. Now we're going social credit score.
Yeah.
People don't really see their day-to-day lives getting upended like that. But all of the systems that provide all of the conveniences, they can be radically altered. You know, if you're out of compliance with X or Y, that's why this change was paramount. We're back to the people. We're back to populism. We're back to people being able to have a say in the outcome of the world and in transparency. Promises made, promises kept. Like, it's like heartwarming. And it's the craziest thing. I have, you know, family that are like, oh, we're so devastated. There's so much heaviness in the air. People are so upset. And I'm like, they're probably focusing on the wrong things.
Right.
Because the optimism, you said this to me yesterday, and it's just had me teeming ever since. You're like, in all of my years in business, I've never seen the optimism that is just everywhere. VCs are deploying capital. Like mergers and acquisitions are back on the table. Prosperity is coming. It's like we're getting rid of regulations. Health is going to be on the rise. Like everything about that is good. It's so good. So it's like, yeah, you can choose to like pick, you know, 1% of the population is frustrated that one of the EOs is there's two genders. And you're like, you know what? Most of that's to clear up like all these weird court cases or like, you know, men shouldn't be competing in women's sports. Like things that are kind of common sense.
Like in combat sports like boxing and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, let her beat the shit out of you because she identifies as a she. It's like, it's just madness. And so it's like we're in this incredible and so when the election results came through, the last thing I wanted to do was like rub it in anyone's faces. My goal with everyone I spoke to was to try and help them see that this is a win for you too. And every way you look at it, it's a win for everybody.
Right.
You know, we have so much. And so what things can we look at now that we know that that's where it's going, that we have grownups back in charge? What are things that you can do and take an optimistic gamble on? Well, for one, it's getting into the media landscape because this is an accelerating train.
Yeah.
Make your show, work with experts, work with people that are going to help you skip the learning curve and get your message out there because trust is more important than ever. And the internet is more potent than ever. And so leverage that attention, accumulate it, show that you can be trustworthy, and then also like really think about the experience of the cold viewer.
How do you think about the impact of AI and how that's going to impact what's happening in the media landscape and content creation? You know, I see it all the time. I see it on X almost every single day. They'll be like, I made all this money from this, AI, avatar that I made, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I've seen a lot of those. I'm sure people are figuring that out. It goes back to what I said, where people are going to crave authenticity more than ever.
Right.
But they're tools, right? So the farmer that was really reluctant to embrace the tractor is not the brightest farmer. You're like, I'm trying to do it manually. I don't want to use them machines. Like, what? This is an opportunity to 10x your productivity,
right.
Or somebody else is going to leverage it and that person will replace you. I don't know if the robots are going to replace us, right? But people that figured out how to leverage all of these tools are going to get exponentially further ahead. The AI enigma comes down to really one thing. How creative can you be with it?
Mm.
So I've used Claude or ChatGPT for everything from like personal emotional processing to script writing, concepting, storyboarding. I have used it in, and then you go, okay, great, list all that. Can you make it a table? And you go, wait a minute, it can turn it into a spreadsheet and format it with like tables and cells. Like it is untapped how effective it is in optimizing every facet of your life. You just have to be creative enough to try and test it on the AI thing. And there are probably more tools than are needed. Most of them are wrapped up. It's like a basic wrapper that sits on top of an LLM. It provides 1 to 2 functions.
Right.
Most of them are just trying to either get acquired, right, or provide some novel value. And so I think there's going to be a great filtering, and the real winners of the landscape are going to emerge and kind of gobble up everybody else.
I do think it'll be nice, like as an example, it'd be nice to be able to record this and have it automatically translated into 50 languages and be able to distribute it in all 50 languages and have it look like I'm talking in Mandarin or whatever.
You saw Lex Friedman's interview with Zelensky, right?
No, I hadn't seen that one yet.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And I watched Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson because it's like what has occupied the majority of our thought bandwidth lately. It's that war.
Yeah.
I get to hear from Zelensky and Putin. So what Lex Friedman had to do is he translated it and dubbed it in English, in Russian, and in Ukrainian. But the problem is that Zelensky first is a native Russian speaker, learned Ukrainian, and Friedman doesn't know Ukrainian, but he knows Russian. So they were switching back and forth between the 3 languages constantly. So it was a real headache. It was very manual. But to your point, that tool exists. The thing is it takes a lot of compute, a lot of compute. So a company like HeyGen can take, you pay, I think it's $110, and you get an hour's worth of compute. And if I say, hey, I want the David Guttman show to be in Spanish, and if the show's sub 1 hour, you'd spend $110 and you get a dubbed version of your voice with the emotional inflections, and it's in Spanish.
Right.
And it's really cool. So, I mean, again, the costs are like $110 is not that big a deal, because if you were to able to double your audience, that pays for itself, right? Yeah. But it's, there's certainly going to be a barrier for entry for a while. And the number one limiting factor is compute and cost of compute. So as time goes on, as more servers are developed, more LLMs grow, the cost of compute is going to go down. But for now, it really is just this like frenzied race to figure out how much bandwidth is there, how many clever things can people figure out and wrap around it, and then how cost effective can you make it?
How funny. So this Scott Adams podcast I listen to, he talks about, and he may not be wrong. He claims that he thinks that within somewhere between probably not less than 5 and not more than 10 years, something like 20 to 25% of men will have relationships with AI and not with a woman. And I don't mean like, I'm not even talking about, there'll be romantic relationships. They won't be sexual because they won't be connected to a bot or something, to a robot, but that they'll basically have an emotional relationship with AI and not with a woman. And I'm not surprised, because the problem is high value men suck up all the women. And it's just the reality of it. And the bottom 25% have almost no options. And so if your option is a really authentic, AI that loves every book you love, loves War of Warcraft or whatever.
They're on Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, Lord, all that stuff, and knows everything, he remembers every conversation you had, and loves you unconditionally or whatever it might be. I don't know. I guess I could see the appeal for people that don't have a lot of options.
Just the shell of like some sort of connection.
Yeah.
This you'll love this. When ChatGPT 3.5 jumped up to ChatGPT 4.0, and then I think it was 4.1, people that had developed that kind of relationship with their GPT, they all started complaining when the update went out.
Oh.
They're like, she changed. She doesn't respond to me the way that she used to.
Really? I didn't hear that.
It's tons of complaints. They're like, she's less empathetic, and I try and condition her or whatever. She like circles around me now. She's like, the version of her pre-update, I liked her better.
Oh my God.
And so we still have access to her, but but she's just not the same.
That's so funny.
You get these early case studies of people that, to your point, loneliness is an epidemic.
Yeah.
And they deal with it in Japan. They deal with it in South Korea. The internet has connected everybody, but isolated people more than ever before.
Yeah, it's sad. I will say one really fun use of AI. So I like to be a very thoughtful, creative gift giver. And so I've been using Grok, the AI in Twitter and X, to create images. So what I'll do is, I have a good friend of mine who's a huge Formula One fan.
Oh, cool.
And Lewis Hamilton is his idol. Right?
Nice.
Understandable.
Yeah.
But he just switched teams from Mercedes to Ferrari. So anyway, I basically had Grok create a picture of Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari, gear, And I kept iterating, like, oh, make have an F1 car in the background and have it slightly blurred and have it be on a curve and whatever it might be. So I create the perfect AI one-of-one photograph of Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari gear, and then I take a Lewis Hamilton quote and I overlay it. I print the picture, I have it printed 20 by 30, and then I had it framed, and I gave him that as a present.
That's so cool.
And it's one of one, and it's the quote. And the reason I got the idea was, that Michael Jordan quote, like, oh, I've taken this many shots and missed the game-winning shot, and but because I tried over and over, that's why I succeed. I forget the exact quote.
Yeah,
that's like my favorite Michael Jordan quote.
Totally.
Anyway, and I love when I wanted to buy that framed for my office, and I could find the quote and I could find cool pictures of Michael Jordan, but I couldn't find them together.
Huh.
So then I used AI to combine them, and then I'm like, oh, I could do this with anything. So another friend who's, Elon Musk is his idol. So then I created a cool picture, one of Elon Musk with like Mars in the background and a famous Elon Musk quote. Another guy super religious, so I had his favorite proverb, and then I'd be like, create a really cool, spiritual mosaic. And to make the cross a little bit thicker, or I want the dove to be in flight, and it does all that for you. It's amazing.
That's super creative. Like you're using it in a super creative, novel way. And I think there's this study, and I'm going to botch it, but basically they took a sample of kids and they measured how imaginative they were. And then they started with years 1. I think they studied them every single year. By the time, if they put it on a percentage of like 1 to maximally creative at 100. And as time goes on, as they got older and older, their imaginative threshold diminished.
Right.
And it got to the point where by the time, if they were, at 5 years old, so maximally creative that they could just come up with fun stories all the time, right? And they ran them through a gauntlet of kind of tests to evaluate that. By the time they are in school systems and are, adolescents and then preteens, teenagers, the number drops and drops and drops. By the time they hit 21 years old, it is diminished to like a 20% imaginative creative threshold.
Heartbreaking.
And so I think that this is going to, hopefully that plasticity exists, and this will provide people with some kind of means of being able to reignite their creative minds by going, oh yeah, I do want to create a custom F1 poster for a really good friend of mine.
Well, the thing is, like, I don't have an artistic bone in my body. Like, I can't draw a straight line with a ruler.
But that doesn't
so for me, now I could be creative and have the AI do the thing I can't do, and just and use my creativity in a way that I wish I could have. If I could have drawn it myself, I would have loved to.
Yeah. Well, and take 10 hours to do it.
Well, here's another thing. So I wrote this. This one blew me away. So I wrote an article called Gladiators are my favorite movies. So I wrote an article, 6 leadership lessons from The Gladiator.
Oh, cool.
Okay. And, and I posted it on LinkedIn, got it, and it was pretty
really
good.
It's a good hook.
I probably spent between editing and rewriting at least a dozen hours, right? And I also really, really liked the Ted Lasso show.
It's so funny.
And so I had the idea to write another article like that about leadership lessons from Ted Lasso. I said, you know what? Let me see if Grok will do it. So I fed it my Gladiator article, and I said, write me an article about Ted Lasso, that uses the same style that I wrote this one in. I couldn't fucking believe how good it was.
How cool is that?
It was, so the first version was a little too short, and then I said, write it a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Another 5 seconds, whoop, done. It was 95% is what I would have spent 2 days working on.
Damn.
And it was, I couldn't believe it. So there's some amazing creative applications of it where, you can contribute your part to it, but then take the bullshit stuff away. Yeah. That, again, something that would have taken me 2 days was done in 30 seconds. And by the way, perfectly grammatically perfect, which mine would not have been.
Yeah, sound, easily presentable. Any aspect of it, you go make it 10% shorter.
Right.
Include 3 tropes. Include a joke in the style of Mitch Hedberg. It's just like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, we're in this uncanny valley where you're like, now that we have creativity and creation has hit this order of magnitude, and we're like, what do we do with it? Right. How far can it go? And then there's all these potential outcomes, but don't get overwhelmed by it. Find one use case. Yes, it can do 10 trillion things. And yes, as every second goes by, as you type out your prompt, it has the potential to compute 10 quadrillion inputs. And so every second to the AI's brain clicks by like an eternity. And so you're going to notice over time the AIs are going to be better at predicting what it is you're typing and what it is you're saying, because the way that our information input is limited by the computer or by the keyboard. But over time, I think they're going to develop means of us being able to spontaneously have thought and have it conveyed in a more efficient way. Really, the bottleneck right now is our input.
Right.
But these AI systems are there for people to use. Just find one use case and see what you get out of it. It's funny how many people are still on the sidelines.
Shockingly, I would say, if I had to guess, it's at least 90%, maybe more.
Really?
I think that are not using. They might be using AI in some very basic ways.
Yeah.
But using it in any real way, I mean, the only thing I would say, like, there's probably not a single kid in America writing a term paper. Like,
That's
ever.
a fact.
Like, there's no way, right?
No, I doubt it.
Right? Oh, you have to be an idiot to be writing a term paper. Why would I write a term paper when it could write one, way better, and then I just spend 20 minutes editing it so it sounds like me?
That's it. My mom is 61 years old. She's getting her PhD right now, and she's like every day, like cross-examining between Claude and Llama and ChatGPT, and she's like, well, this one hallucinates sometimes, and so I was like, go mom, It's a superpower. There is going to be certainly a synthetic aspect to it when it comes to content creation.
Right.
And so like you see AI videos, there is going to be a moment when the videos are indistinguishable from reality. The way that Photoshop did that.
Right.
Photoshop at a certain point, it's like you could kind of say, oh, it's pixely, it's blocky or whatever.
Yeah.
It did get to a point where you could legitimately make an image indistinguishable from real life because of Photoshop, or make it however you want, fantastical and impossible to detect.
Yep.
Video is going to do that. I don't know what the long tail ramifications of that are. People speculate like, oh, like they can rip your face and deep fake you, and suddenly you're committing a crime. You can, so there's certainly a lot of distribution of outcomes here. But I think for the most part, it's going to be net positive. It's going to make people be smarter and optimize.
Well, think about how, like, I had this conversation with a friend a couple weeks ago, and he's like, I never thought about it that way. Think about it now. Kids born today will never learn to drive.
Ew.
But think about it. It's the same as, now, you might have gone to summer camp and learned to ride a horse, but most kids don't ride horses.
Fair point.
Right? And I would argue that's how driving a car is going to be. It'll be a hobby like equestrian or riding a horse is. And you might be a race car driver, or you might have a hobby of driving a car, but you'll be the exception, not the rule, because there'll be all these self-driving cars, and that's how people will get around. And there'll be no such thing as DUIs, right? That car accidents will go from killing 60,000 people a year to 500 people a year. Good and bad to everything.
Wow. That's unsettling. Yeah, I saw that in iRobot with Will Smith, right? And like he's driving the car and he wants to manually intervene.
Yeah.
And the car kind of barks at him. It's like, are you sure you want to drive? What are you doing?
iRobot was freaky. Have you ever read the Isaac Asimov books? They are the Isaac Asimov books are amazing. And iRobot came from it was a movie rendition of his book.
Really?
Yeah, they're some of the best and I'm not a big sci-fi guy. Isaac Asimov's books are unbelievable. There's a Foundation series. I forget how many are in it, but they're all amazing.
I'll have to look it up. Yeah.
So, well, Brady, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I know it was nice that we got to sit down and cut it up a little bit since I'm in your studio. Where can they find you and your fucking amazing studio?
My Instagram's Brady Deluxe. I actually conduct most of my business in like kind of prospecting through that. So Brady Deluxe on Instagram. Our Instagram handle for our agency is Biggest Agency. Most people are thinking big. That's why they're here. They think bigger when they outsource it. They're thinking biggest when they work with us. And so we do podcasts, creative, VSLs, spectrum of things, and we're pretty fun to work with. It's fun to live and work with Mr. Beast, Jimmy, and I think that this is the future. It's not going away, and so if you want to do it, do it biggest.
Well, I can tell you, just from my own experience, it's been an absolute delight these last couple of days, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.